What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks, and today we are doing a deck tech on Ayara. I really like the front side of this girl. We're going to sacrifice creatures, we're going to deal damage to our opponents, and we're going to gain life. Then we flip her over, and we're cheating our creatures and artifacts from our graveyard to the battlefield. We can even get around that exile clause by sacrificing our artifacts or creatures before the end step, right? Which is what I really like about this deck. We don't have to exile our key pieces. The game plan is pretty simple, guys. We're not paying for shit. We're going to use sneak attack like effects to cheat our creatures onto the battlefield. Then they're going to die and end up in the graveyard, and we're going to get some value off of them, like Phyrexian Tritiform, right? We're going to sacrifice him to Ayara, deal 9 damage, and get some creatures left over. We will also run like worm coil effects like that. It's going to be pretty fun. And then we'll have stuff to sacrifice those big creatures to get value off of them that aren't Ayara. That way, when we get a payoff like, I don't know, Ghoul Color Gisa on the battlefield, we can flip Ayara, bring our Phyrexian Tritiform back onto the battlefield, sacrifice it before the exile clause, and get 9 zombies. This is going to be a Power Matters deck that just fills the graveyard, and we're going to sacrifice those big giant creatures and big giant artifacts for value. So, if that sounds like a deck tech you're into, let's get into it. The first thing we need is a lineup of artifacts that want to be sacrificed. Ancient Stone Idol, whenever he dies, you're going to get a 6/12, and that CMC is going to deal 10 damage to someone's face. Phyrexian Tritiform and Triplicate Titan are both 9 drops that leave 9 power whenever they die, so the power stays the same, but our board just gets wider. Worm Coil Engine, another one that leaves some little creatures whenever it dies, super solid. Bosch Iron Golem, with this guy on the battlefield, it's going to be super safe to flip our commander. Now we get that broken backside, and we can use Bosch Iron Golem to sacrifice the creatures that we reanimate with her. Su-Chi Cave Guard, sacrifice this guy to our commander to do a casual 8 damage, gain 8 life, and add 8 mana to our mana pool. That sounds like some insane value to me. Cityscape Leveler is just a solid 8-drop that starts removing our opponent's key pieces. Combustible Gearhulk. Hey, if they make us mill, it's whatever. We want stuff in our graveyard anyway in this deck, and they're gonna take a ton of damage. So 9 times out of 10, if you're choosing the player with the lowest life total, they're probably just gonna give you those 3 cards, which is gonna be amazing. Ruin Grinder. This guy's a wheel on a big body. He's exactly what we want in the deck, right? A big body, and sacrifice him. We fill our graveyard and refill our hand. I love it. Noxious Gearhulk. Just more super solid removal in the deck. Still Hellkite. I really like this guy for getting rid of those token strategies. He can also get rid of treasure tokens. He's very flexible. Now, if you think we're going to hardcast those creatures, you're out of your damn mind. We have a plethora of ways to cheat creatures right onto the battlefield with this deck. Sneak Attack. Super solid. 1 mana, just throw your biggest artifact onto the battlefield, and then it will go to the graveyard, but we have other ways to get stuff back from the graveyard. Perforos Bronze Blood. I like this one because it's going to let you choose between artifact or creature, and this deck is full of a lot of big artifacts and a lot of creatures. Ilharg Razeboar, this one's even more solid because it's going to bring it out, and then it'll shove it right back into your hand. But if we do want it in the graveyard, we can just sacrifice it with our commander, and everything is all good. Jaxus the Troublemaker will just go ahead and start creating token copies of our biggest creature. Making token copies of Triplicate Titan or, Phyrexian Tritiform just to sacrifice is going to be extremely broken in this deck and honestly super fun. Arms Race, this one lets you put an artifact onto the battlefield, but those artifact creatures are going to count for this, so it's 4 mana for a 9-drop. I love it. Feldon of the Third Path, once they're in the graveyard, we can use this guy to bring them back and sacrifice him with our commander, doing a ton of damage, and while we're doing that, we're just padding our life total. Ortheon, Hero of Lava Brink. This guy is going to be super flexible. We can pay 2 mana to create a token copy or, 9 mana to create 5 token copies. That's going to end the game outright, especially if we're, copying a Worm Coil Engine or one of those Triplicate Titans. I will mention we also run Bolas's Citadel because, hey, it fits the theme of being an artifact and we're gaining a ton of life, so we can start paying life to drop those massive creatures from the top of our library just straight onto the battlefield. We also play Aetherflux Reservoir. While this isn't a storm deck, we can get above 50 life fairly easily in this deck because of our commander's ability to just gain a ton of life when we're sacrificing those massive creatures. If you wanted to take this deck to the next level, you could add a Sensei's Divining Top, and these 3 go infinite and create a pretty solid combo. But I didn't go that route because honestly I just want one to do the Death Star ability while the other one plays free stuff from the top of my library. But I figured I'd let you guys know. Moving on, let's talk about the core of the deck. We have Thornbite Staff. This is going to be amazing with our commander. We just need to equip this onto our commander, and then we sacrifice that big creature, and she's going to untap, ready to sacrifice our next creature. Super solid. Ghoul-Caller Gisa, another super solid option to equip the Thornbite Staff too, right? Because now we're sacrificing a massive creature, we're getting X 2/2 zombies, an instant board state out of nowhere, and then you know that'll untop Ghoul-Caller Gisa. I like it. Imhotep the Stormlord, whenever we're rifling those artifacts in and out of our graveyard, we're just creating a board state while we're doing that, you know, giving us blockers and, again, a solid board state that's just not 9 drops out of nowhere. Scarecrow, super solid, 4 mana to bring a 9 drop onto the battlefield. I love this guy. Mirror Retriever, this guy dies, we get to return something or an artifact from the graveyard to our hand. Really good. Chainer Nightmare Adept on top of being able to cast stuff from our graveyard. This is going to give stuff haste that we reanimate from the graveyard. Really good. And also, you know, it's a discard outlet if we need something in the graveyard. Fits 3 themes in the deck. I love it. Nim Deathmantle. This one can go infinite, but honestly, 9 times out of 10, we just want to pay 4 mana to bring that 9 drop right back onto the battlefield to sacrifice again. I mean, you can't beat that value. 4 mana for that 9 drop to come back onto the battlefield, ready to sacrifice again next turn. Real quick, the infinite combo goes something like this. You want the Nim Deathmantle on the battlefield, you need Su-Chi Caveguard, and our commander with the Thornbite Staff attached to it. Now it's pretty simple. Use our commander to sacrifice the Su-Chi Caveguard. The Su-Chi Caveguard is going to give us 8 mana. Use 4 of that 8 mana to trigger the Nim Deathmantle, and then our commander is going to untap because Su-Chi Caveguard died, and then Su-Chi Caveguard will come back onto the battlefield, sacrifice him again, and the loop continues till all of our opponents are dead. Pretty solid. We can use Altar of Dementia to get that graveyard thick, and then we play Buried Alive. Buried Alive has a really cool synergy with Scrap Welder. All we need to do is make sure we have a 10, 9, and an 8 drop in the graveyard, and we can use Buried Alive to search those creatures up. Next, let's give Scrap Welder a chance with the Thornbite Staff, right? So now we sacrifice the 10 drop, get the 9 drop, sacrifice the 9 drop, get the 8 drop, and we can keep going down the line until we literally get to a 1 drop. Now, it doesn't go that far in the deck, but it's still insane value. We also run Scrap Trawler in the deck, which can do something similar, but you don't have to tap it to activate it, and it only gets returned to your hand. So not as good, but still really solid in the deck. Faithless Looting. I like this card because early game it's going to throw those massive creatures into the graveyard if we want them there at that time, and you know, help us get those land drops we need early game. Moving on to card draw. It's really effective in this deck because we went 2 routes. We went Wheels and Power Matters. Wheel of Misfortune, Dark Deal, Reforge the Soul, Magus of the Wheel, and Dragon Mage. These cards are all going to allow us to fill our graveyard while getting a fresh grip. I want to single out Dragon Mage here because we can get Dragon Mage out of the graveyard using the flip side of Ayara. That way, whenever we're literally stuck, have no cards in hand, as long as we have this guy in the graveyard, we can refill our hand and get our game plan back on track. Cut the Profits. You're about to see in the ramp section that we can literally pop off and create a ton of mana out of nowhere. So having a card like Cut the Profits is pretty solid in here because we can end up drawing enough cards to actually end up discarding cards we want into the graveyard, especially since we can copy it with that casualty ability. Mask of Grizzlebrand. Usually a high risk, high reward card, right? Because if you don't get an attack with that creature, you don't get any life link from it, you're just paying like 9 life to draw 9 cards, which can kill you quickly. But with Ayara, we gain that life whenever we sacrifice the creature, so it's going to be a net equal and you're just going to get the cards. Super solid. Disciple of Bolas and Shadowheart can sacrifice those massive creatures to refill our entire hand. Greven, another card that's supposed to punish you by being high risk and high reward. But in this deck, we're going to have a ton of extra life just sitting around waiting to be spent for value. And Greven is the perfect value piece to abuse that. Now we're paying life to draw a ton of cards and deal a ton of damage to our opponents. Solemn Simulacrum, again, super solid. We're going to get some ramp, we're going to get some card draw, and we can bring this guy out later for more ramp and more card draw if we want to take the value engine route. Moving on to the ramp, guys, it gets pretty crazy. We have Illuminar Saras. Notably, hey guys, Thornbite Staff, use loser right here. This guy's going to be crazy with that card on him. A super solid card in the deck because he values off of the high CMC cost spells just like our commander. We're sacrificing them to add a ton of mana to our mana pool. Ruthless Technomancer, this guy goes ahead and gives you those treasure tokens, judging on the power instead of the CMC, but that's not much of an issue. Additionally, we can sacrifice those treasure tokens to then reanimate cards from our graveyard, or like I said, just a shit ton of mana. Neheb the Eternal, another super crazy card in the deck, because remember, our commander is dealing damage to our opponent's face, so we're going to get mana equal to that. Additionally, if we're able to attack with the 9-drop and then sacrifice it to our commander, we're just going to get 18 mana out of nowhere. This guy's going to be pretty crazy. Rakdos, Lord of Riots, does a very similar thing, but in a way better way. We're just going to be able to throw creatures onto the battlefield with this because of how much artifact creatures we run. If we have 9-drops and we've done 9 damage, we're just throwing them onto the battlefield, sacrificing them to draw more cards, and then throwing more creatures onto the battlefield. I love this guy in the deck. It's honestly perfect. The Reaver Cleaver, more insane token generation. Wayfarer's Bauble, super solid early game ramp along with Soul Ring. We can't forget the Arcane Signet, the Rakdos Signet. Talisman of Indulgence is going to be perfect here, as well as Fellowar Stone for those turn 2 mana ramp spells. Lastly, guys, we have Removal. Chaos Warp, super solid, gets rid of whatever permanent you need gone. Feed the Swarm, really good against those enchantments. Tragic Slip, we're sacrificing creatures constantly, so getting that morbid ability is not going to be hard in this deck. Tybalt's Trickery is going to be insane because no one's expecting the red counterspell. They're just not. Terror of the Peaks, this guy has an insane synergy with Athorion. If you pay that 9 mana to create 5 token copies of Terror of the Peaks, that's 125 damage we get to, just throw at our opponents. So that's probably going to end the game outright. Also, it's just super solid in the deck because we're just slamming 9-drops onto the battlefield. Blasphemous Act, super solid to get rid of every creature on the battlefield. This deck is weak to token strategies, so this can help with that. Get rid of the treasure tokens, get rid of all the artifacts. This has been the year of the artifact commander, so this is definitely a very good card right now. Mandate of Abaddon. I like this because we are playing some massive creatures, so we're going to be able to keep what we want while getting rid of, again, those token strategies, right? That's going to do it for the deck tech, guys. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this deck tech, and as always, leave some extra suggestions in the comments below. I always love reading them, and as always, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors. I'll see you in the next one.